I handed him the phone records with the text thread still open on my screen. $420,000. That's what my husband Marcus was begging me to wire to his supposedly dying ex-girlfriend. The dining room went completely silent. His mother stopped mid-sip of her wine. His sister Jennifer set down her fork so carefully it didn't make a sound. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Let me know in the comments which city you're watching from, because what I'm about to tell you is going to make you question everything you thought you knew about marriage, money, and family loyalty. That moment you just witnessed, when I showed Marcus those phone records at Sunday dinner with his entire family watching, was the culmination of 18 months of lies, theft, and manipulation. But to understand how we got there, to understand why I chose that exact moment to destroy him in front of everyone he loved, I need to take you back to where this all started. My name is Alina Harrington. I'm 42 years old, and when I married Marcus Harrington 6 years ago, I thought I was marrying into a family that valued honesty and hard work. I was wrong on both counts. I'm a commercial real estate broker, one of the top 3 in the metropolitan area. Last year alone, I closed $23 million in transactions. My commission structure is aggressive, and I'm good at what I do, very good. But you wouldn't know that from the way Marcus's family treated me. The Harringtons are old money, not the kind that still has money, mind you, just the kind that remembers having it and can't let go of the ghost. Marcus's mother Patricia lives in the family estate in Westchester, a sprawling property that's been mortgaged 3 times. His sister Jennifer drives a BMW she can barely afford and works part-time at an art gallery that her mother's friend owns. Marcus himself came from a modest trust fund that ran dry 2 years into our marriage, which is when he suddenly became very interested in my career earnings. I met Marcus at a charity auction. He was charming, well-dressed, and had that easy confidence that comes from never having been told no as a child. He pursued me aggressively, and I was flattered. I was 36, focused on my career, and hadn't had a serious relationship in years. He made me feel seen. Looking back, I realize he made me feel seen because he was calculating exactly what I was worth. We married in a small ceremony at the estate. Patricia insisted on planning everything, which meant I paid for everything while she took credit for the tasteful execution. The wedding cost $78,000. I wrote the checks. Patricia told everyone she'd gifted us the perfect day. The first year was fine. Marcus worked in finance, or at least he said he did. He went to an office, came home at reasonable hours, talked about deals and clients. I was traveling constantly, closing contracts, building my portfolio. I didn't pay attention to the details of his work because I was too busy excelling at mine. The first incident that should have warned me came 14 months into our marriage. We were at Sunday dinner at the estate. These dinners were mandatory, a Harrington family tradition that happened every week without fail. Patricia sat at the head of the table, Jennifer to her right, Marcus to her left, and me next to Marcus like an afterthought. Jennifer was complaining about her car. The BMW needed new tires and the dealership wanted $1,600. She turned to Marcus with wide, pleading eyes. I just don't know how I'm going to manage it. The gallery hasn't paid me yet this month. Marcus looked at me. Alina, you just closed that office building in Midtown, right? Can you help Jennifer out? I had closed that building. My commission was $340,000, but that wasn't the point. Jennifer, I said carefully, have you thought about shopping around? Costco does tires. It might be cheaper. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Patricia set down her wine glass. Alina, the Harringtons don't shop at Costco. The tires are the same quality, I said. Michelin is Michelin. It's about supporting local businesses, Patricia said. Her voice had that edge that I would come to know very well, about maintaining relationships with people who understand quality. Jennifer shouldn't have to compromise her standards because of money. I could have pointed out that money was exactly why Jennifer needed to compromise. Instead, I smiled and wrote Jennifer a check for $1,600. She took it without saying thank you. That night, I transferred $100,000 into a separate account under my maiden name. Marcus didn't notice. He never looked at our finances beyond his own spending. The second incident was 6 months later. We were at the estate again because we were always at the estate. Patricia announced that the roof needed repairs. The quotes she received ranged from $45,000 to $62,000. She sighed dramatically. I just don't know how I'm going to manage it. The estate has been in the family for 4 generations. I can't let it fall into disrepair. Marcus turned to me before she'd even finished speaking. Alina can help, can't you? You had a good quarter. I'd had an exceptional quarter. I'd closed 4 major deals and earned just over $500,000, but I'd also started paying attention to patterns. Patricia, have you looked into a home equity line of credit? Given the property value, you should qualify. Patricia's face tightened. I will not put the family estate at risk with debt. It's not risk if you can afford the payments, I said, and the interest is tax deductible. Alina, Marcus said quietly. There was a warning in his tone. My mother is asking for help. I'm offering help, I said. Financial advice is help. Jennifer laughed, actually laughed. Alina, you're so literal sometimes. She's not asking for advice. She's asking for family support. I looked at Marcus. He wouldn't meet my eyes. I looked at Patricia. She was watching me with that cool, evaluating expression that I would come to hate. I looked at Jennifer, who was smiling like she'd just won something. I wrote a check for $47,000. Patricia took it and said, "Thank you, dear. It's nice to see you finally understanding how family works." That night, I transferred another $200,000 into my separate account. I also called Catherine Stone, an attorney I'd worked with on several real estate deals. "Catherine," I said, "I need to talk to you about asset protection, not for a client, for me." Catherine met me for coffee the next morning. I told her everything. The checks I'd written, the way Marcus volunteered my money without asking, the casual cruelty of his family's assumptions about my role. Catherine listened without interrupting, which is one of the things I've always valued about her. When I finished, she said, "Alina, are you planning to leave him?" "I don't know yet," I said, "but I want to be prepared if I decide to." "Smart," Catherine said. She pulled out a legal pad. "Let's talk about what you've got and how to protect it." Over the next hour, Catherine laid out a strategy. Document everything, keep meticulous records of every dollar I earned and every dollar I spent. Maintain the separate account and continue building it. Do not commingle assets if I could avoid it. And most importantly, if I did decide to leave, do not warn him. Do not give him time to hide anything or prepare a defense. I followed her advice to the letter. Every Sunday dinner became an opportunity to observe and document. Every request for money was recorded in a spreadsheet with date, amount, and stated purpose. Every conversation where Marcus volunteered my earnings was noted with as much detail as I could remember. I didn't know it yet, but I was building a case, not just for divorce, but for something much bigger. 3 months after my conversation with Catherine, Marcus came home with news. He'd been offered a position at a boutique investment firm. Salary was modest, only $90,000 a year, but the prestige was significant. The Harrington name still meant something in certain circles, and this firm wanted that connection. I congratulated him. I took him to dinner. I told him I was proud of him, and then I watched as exactly none of his behavior changed. He still came to me for money. He still volunteered my earnings to his mother and sister. He still treated my career as a family resource rather than my personal achievement. The Sunday dinners continued. The requests continued. I wrote checks for Jennifer's rent when she was between opportunities at the gallery. I paid for Patricia's country club membership when she explained that letting it lapse would be social suicide. I covered Marcus's car payment when he bought a Tesla he couldn't afford because the Harrington son shouldn't be driving a Honda. I wrote the checks with a smile. I made small, practical suggestions that were ignored or mocked. And every 2 weeks, like clockwork, I transferred a portion of my earnings into the account they didn't know existed. If you've ever been dismissed by people who should know better, people who should see your value, you know what that feels like. The way they look past you, even when you're the one holding everything together. I was funding their lifestyle, their illusions of grandeur, their refusal to adapt to reality. And they treated me like the help, but I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was curious. I wanted to see how far they would push. I wanted to know what they really thought of me when they looked at me across that dining table every Sunday. So I kept showing up, I kept smiling, I kept writing checks, and I kept records of absolutely everything. Then came March 15th, 2 years ago, and everything changed. It started with a phone call I wasn't supposed to hear. I'd come home early from a site visit because the client had rescheduled. Marcus didn't know I was home. He was in his study with the door closed, and I was in the kitchen getting water when I heard him say a name I recognized. Vanessa. Vanessa Crawford was Marcus's ex-girlfriend from college. He told me about her during our engagement, positioned her as the one that got away, the great love story that didn't work out because they were too young. He'd been wistful about it in a way that I'd found endearing at the time. Now, hearing him say her name in that tone, I felt something shift in my chest. I moved closer to the study door. The old house had thick walls, but his voice was raised slightly, emotional in a way I rarely heard. "I know, Vanessa, I know it's been hard, but you can't keep calling me like this. Alina doesn't understand our history." There was a pause while she spoke. I couldn't hear her words, just the rhythm of her voice through the phone. "That's not fair," Marcus said. "You know I would help you if I could, but my finances are complicated right now. Everything is tied up in joint accounts, and Alina watches every penny." That was a lie. I didn't watch his spending at all. He had a credit card with a $20,000 limit that I paid off every month without question. He had free access to our joint checking account. The only account I monitored closely was the one he didn't know about. "I'm not saying I won't help," Marcus continued. "I'm saying I need to be careful about how I do it. Give me some time to figure it out." "I'll call you next week." He hung up. I walked loudly into the living room, made noise with my bag and keys, called out that I was home. Marcus emerged from his study with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "You're back early," he said. "Client rescheduled," I said. "How was your day?" "Fine, boring conference calls." He kissed my cheek. "What do you want for dinner?" We ordered Thai food. We watched a movie. He was affectionate and attentive. And the entire time, I was thinking about that phone call, about the way he'd said Vanessa's name, about the lie he'd told about our finances. The next morning, after Marcus left for work, I did something I'd never done before. I went into his study and opened his laptop. His password was still the same as it had been for years, his childhood dog's name. He'd never been creative about security. I found the messages immediately. He hadn't even tried to hide them. Email threads with Vanessa going back 6 months. Text message screenshots he'd saved. Photos of the two of them from college that he'd apparently never deleted. The content was worse than I'd imagined. Vanessa wasn't doing well financially. She'd moved back to her hometown in Ohio after a divorce, was working as a teacher, struggling with debt. And Marcus was positioning himself as her white knight, the one who would help her, the one who still cared. But it wasn't just emotional support. There were discussions about money, small amounts at first. $500 to help with her car payment, $1,000 when her heating system broke, then bigger numbers, $3,000 toward her credit card debt, $5,000 for medical bills, and every single transfer had come from our joint account. I sat in his study chair, looking at the screen, doing the math in my head. Over 6 months, Marcus had sent Vanessa approximately $18,000, money I had earned. Money he had taken without asking, without telling me, while lying to her about why he couldn't send more. I took screenshots of everything, every email, every text, every bank transfer confirmation. I uploaded them to the cloud storage that Catherine had helped me set up. Then I closed the laptop, made sure everything was exactly as I'd found it, and went to the office. I didn't confront Marcus, not yet. Because as angry as I was, as betrayed as I felt, I knew this was exactly the kind of evidence Catherine had told me to gather. And more importantly, I knew this probably wasn't the whole story. That Sunday at dinner at the estate, I watched Marcus differently. I watched how he interacted with his mother, with his sister. I watched how they looked at me when they thought I wasn't paying attention. And I saw what I'd been too busy to see before. They didn't just disrespect me. They actively resented me. Jennifer's eyes followed me with cold calculation every time I spoke. Patricia's smile was thin and false whenever she asked me for something. And Marcus, my husband, the man who promised to cherish me, looked at me like I was a resource to be managed. After dinner, while Patricia and Jennifer were clearing plates, Marcus pulled me aside. "I need to talk to you about something," he said. My heart rate picked up. Had he somehow discovered I'd been in his laptop? "What is it?" "Jennifer's having some financial trouble. Her rent is going up and the gallery is cutting her hours. She needs about $4,000 to get through the next few months." I looked past him to where Jennifer was laughing at something Patricia had said. She didn't look worried. She looked perfectly content. "Did she ask you for help?" "She mentioned it to Mom, and Mom mentioned it to me. You know how Jennifer is. She's too proud to ask directly." "Too proud," I repeated. "Alina," he took my hand. Touch felt different now that I knew about Vanessa. "I know we've been helping my family a lot lately, and I appreciate how generous you've been, but this is temporary. Jennifer just needs to get back on her feet." "How many times has Jennifer needed to get back on her feet in the last 2 years, Marcus?" His expression hardened slightly. "That's not fair. She's family." "So am I said. "I'm your wife. Doesn't that count as family?" "Of course it does. That's exactly why I know you'll help." "Because you understand what family means." I could have told him what I'd found. I could have confronted him about Vanessa, about the lies, about the money he'd been sending without my knowledge. But something Catherine had said came back to me. "Don't warn him, don't give him time to prepare a defense." So instead, I smiled. I said, "Let me think about it." His face relaxed immediately. "Thank you, I knew you'd understand." That week, I transferred another $150,000 into my separate account. I also made an appointment with Catherine for the following Monday. And I started documenting everything with a new level of detail. Not just the money, but the conversations, the assumptions, the casual cruelty of being treated like a bank rather than a person. I went back into Marcus's laptop twice more over the next month. Each time I found new messages with Vanessa. The amounts he was sending were increasing. $2,000 here, $3,000 there. He was telling her to be patient, that he was working on getting access to more funds, that his wife didn't appreciate how hard things were for other people. His wife. He called me his wife in those messages, never by name, like I was a title rather than a person, a role he was playing rather than a partner he'd chosen. The total he'd sent to Vanessa was now up to $32,000, and in their most recent exchange, she'd asked for something bigger. Her car had died completely, and she needed a new one. She wasn't asking for a luxury vehicle, just something reliable to get to work, something in the $15,000 range. Marcus had told her he'd figure it out, that he just needed a little time to move some money around without me noticing. I sat there in his study, reading about how my husband was planning to steal $15,000 from me to buy his ex-girlfriend a car, and I felt something inside me go very cold and very clear. This wasn't just about money anymore. It had never been just about money. This was about respect, about value, about whether I was a person or a resource to be extracted. I took more screenshots. I backed up everything 3 different ways, and then I called Catherine. "I need to accelerate the timeline," I told her. "What happened?" I told her about Vanessa, about the money, about the car. Catherine was quiet for a long moment. "Alina, this changes things. This isn't just family dynamics anymore." This is financial infidelity, possibly theft, depending on how your accounts are structured. What do I need to do? First, we need to protect your assets immediately. Then we need to decide what outcome you want. Are you leaving him? I thought about that question. Thought about the man I'd married versus the man I'd discovered. Thought about Sunday dinners and casual cruelty and being called the wife like it was an obstacle rather than a relationship. Yes, I said, I'm leaving him. But I want to do it right. I want him to understand exactly what he's losing and why. Catherine's voice was approving. Then we have work to do. Over the next 2 months, Catherine and I built a strategy. We established a timeline, gathered additional evidence, and prepared for multiple scenarios. I continued going to Sunday dinners. I continued writing checks when asked. I continued being the perfect, generous wife who didn't ask too many questions. And with every smile, every check, every moment of playing along, I was building the trap that would eventually destroy them all. The situation with Vanessa escalated in May. Marcus came to me with a story about a work colleague who needed a loan, $15,000 for an emergency family situation. He promised it would be paid back within 6 months with interest. I knew immediately it was for Vanessa's car. He was lying directly to my face, expecting me to believe him, expecting me to hand over money without questioning the story. Tell me more about this colleague, I said. We were in the living room. I was on the couch with my laptop reviewing contracts. Marcus was standing near the window, backlit by afternoon sun. His name is David Richardson. He works in my department. His sister is sick and needs surgery, but she doesn't have insurance. It's a dire situation. That's terrible, I said. I kept my voice sympathetic. What kind of surgery? Marcus hesitated, just for a second, but I saw it. He hadn't prepared details for the lie. Heart surgery, she needs heart surgery. How awful. Where is she having it done? Cleveland Clinic. They're supposed to be the best for cardiac issues. I nodded slowly. And David can't get a loan from a bank because of his credit. Exactly. He's had some financial trouble in the past. Bad divorce, you know how it is. I do know how it is, I said. I looked back at my laptop. Let me think about it. 15,000 is a lot to lend to someone I've never met. Marcus's jaw tightened. Alina, a woman's life is at stake. Then David should be talking to charity care departments and payment plans, not borrowing from coworkers. I met his eyes. Unless there's something else going on here that you're not telling me. For a moment, I thought he might confess. I could see him calculating, trying to decide if the truth would work better than the lie. But then he smiled, and I knew he'd chosen to commit to the deception. There's nothing else. I'm just trying to help a friend. I thought you'd understand that. I'll transfer the money tomorrow, I said. His relief was visible. Thank you. I knew I could count on you. That night, I sent Catherine every screenshot I had of Marcus's messages with Vanessa, including the ones where he discussed needing a believable story to get the car money from me. Catherine responded with 3 words, he's building our case. I transferred the $15,000 to Marcus the next day. He transferred it to Vanessa that afternoon. And I documented every step of the transaction in the spreadsheet that was becoming the roadmap of my divorce. But it wasn't just Marcus anymore. His family was getting bolder too. In June, Patricia announced that the estate needed extensive landscaping work. The gardens had been neglected for years, and she wanted them restored to their former glory. The quote was $28,000. It's an investment in the property value, she explained at Sunday dinner. And it's important for maintaining the family's image in the community. I looked at the quote she'd brought. It was from a luxury landscaping company that specialized in historic properties. Patricia, I can refer you to the company I use for my commercial properties. They do excellent work for about half this price. Alina, dear, this isn't a strip mall. This is the Harrington estate. We have standards to maintain. Standards are good, I said, but value matters too. Why spend $28,000 when $14,000 gets you the same result? Jennifer set down her wine glass. Because we're not poor, Alina, or we shouldn't have to act like we are. Acting like you're not poor and actually not being poor are two different things, I said. The room went very quiet. Patricia's expression was frozen somewhere between shock and rage. Marcus put his hand on my arm in warning. Jennifer was staring at me like I'd committed an unforgivable sin. What exactly are you implying? Patricia's voice was ice. I could have backed down, should have backed down probably if I wanted to maintain the peace, but I was so tired of the performance. I'm not implying anything, I'm stating a fact. You want $28,000 for landscaping when you can get comparable service for half that cost. That's not maintaining standards, that's ego. Patricia stood up from the table. I think it's time for you to leave. Marcus stood too. Mom, let's not overreact. Your wife just called me egotistical in my own home. I'm not overreacting, I'm asking her to leave. I gathered my things calmly. Marcus followed me to the car, apologizing, asking what had gotten into me, saying I knew his mother didn't mean anything by her comments about standards. I'll write her the check, I said, $28,000 for the landscaping. I'll have it ready by next Sunday. Marcus's entire demeanor changed. The anger evaporated. You will. Alina, thank you. I know Mom comes across as difficult sometimes, but I'll write the check, I repeated. Tell your mother I apologize for my rudeness. I drove home alone. Marcus stayed at the estate to smooth things over with Patricia, and I sat in my car in our driveway for 15 minutes, shaking with an emotion I couldn't quite name. It wasn't just anger anymore, it was something deeper, something colder. I wrote the check for the landscaping. I also made an appointment with a forensic accountant that Catherine recommended. Because if I was going to do this, if I was going to burn this family's world down, I needed to know exactly what I was working with. The accountant's name was Richard Torres. He came to my office on a Wednesday afternoon and I showed him everything. Every check I'd written to the Harringtons, every request Marcus had made, every transfer to Vanessa, 3 years of financial documentation laid out in spreadsheets and bank statements. Richard didn't speak for almost 20 minutes. He just scrolled and calculated and made notes. Finally, he looked up. Mrs. Harrington, are you aware that you've given or loaned your husband's family approximately $378,000 over the last 3 years? I'd known it was a lot. I hadn't known it was that much. Are you certain? Give me a week to verify everything and I'll have an exact figure. But yes, I'm certain. And that's not including the money your husband has sent to his ex-girlfriend, which totals another $47,000 as of this morning. $425,000. I had given the Harrington family almost $500,000 while they treated me like an inconvenient source of funding rather than a person. How much of it is recoverable? I asked. Richard's expression was grim. In a divorce, some of it may be, but proving gifts versus loans is difficult. And the money to the ex-girlfriend, that's marital funds, so technically half of it is his to do with as he pleases, even if the way he pleased was unconscionable. What if it wasn't a divorce? What if it was fraud? Richard leaned back in his chair. That's a different conversation. That's a criminal conversation. Are you prepared to go there? I thought about Marcus's face when he lied about David Richardson. I thought about Patricia's cold dismissal. I thought about Jennifer's casual cruelty and the way they all looked at me like I was too stupid to see what they were doing. I want to explore every option. Richard spent the next 2 weeks analyzing everything. He found patterns I'd missed. The money I'd loaned Jennifer for rent had been used to buy designer handbags. Patricia's country club membership fees were 50% higher than comparable clubs in the area. She was paying for premium services and charging me the whole cost while claiming it was basic membership. Marcus's Tesla payment was for a vehicle he'd registered in his mother's name for insurance purposes, which meant I'd spent $43,000 on a car I didn't own. And the money to Vanessa wasn't just for emergencies. Richard tracked some of the transfers to luxury purchases. Concert tickets, weekend trips, expensive dinners. Marcus was funding a relationship with his ex-girlfriend using money I'd earned, while telling me we needed to be careful with spending because his salary was modest. Catherine reviewed Richard's findings and called me into her office on a Friday afternoon. She had 3 other attorneys with her, all specializing in different aspects of family law and financial litigation. Elena, Catherine said, we need to talk about what you're actually trying to accomplish here, because what you have isn't just a divorce case. What you have is potential fraud, embezzlement, and financial abuse. But pursuing those avenues means going public. It means criminal charges, possibly jail time for Marcus, social destruction for his family. Are you prepared for that level of warfare? I looked at the 4 attorneys, at the files spread across the conference table, at the evidence of 3 years of systematic exploitation. What are my other options? The next hour was education in legal strategy. We could pursue a standard divorce with asset division, which would be ugly but private. We could pursue divorce with fraud claims, which would be messier and more public. Or we could build a case for criminal prosecution, which would be nuclear but would also likely result in full restitution and potential jail time. What do you want? Catherine asked finally. What outcome would make you feel like justice was served? I thought about that question for a long time. I want them to understand what they did. I want them to face consequences. And I want everyone who watched them treat me like garbage to know exactly who was really supporting whom. Catherine smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of an attorney who'd just been given permission to destroy someone. Then we're going to need a bigger stage. Over the next 3 months, we built the case. Richard continued his forensic analysis, finding additional discrepancies and questionable transactions. Catherine coordinated with a prosecutor who specialized in financial crimes, building a potential criminal case alongside the civil divorce proceedings. I continued my regular life, going to work, closing deals, attending Sunday dinners, writing checks when asked. And with every passing week, the trap got stronger. In August, Marcus came to me with the biggest ask yet. Vanessa's daughter needed money for college, $25,000 for tuition at Ohio State. Marcus presented it as another work colleague story, but he was getting sloppy with the details. This colleague's name was Michael. The son was going to Penn State, or was it Michigan State? He couldn't keep the lie straight. That's a lot of money, I said. We were in bed. It was late. He'd waited until I was tired to bring it up. I know, but Michael has helped me out so many times at work. I feel like I owe him. How has he helped you? Marcus went vague, covering for me in meetings, taking on extra projects when I was swamped, office politics stuff. So you want to give him $25,000 for office politics, for his son's education, Alina. Come on. You know how important education is. I did know. I'd paid for my own education through scholarships and part time work. I'd graduated debt free through careful planning and sacrifice. And now I was being asked to pay for the education of my husband's ex girlfriend's daughter while he lied to my face about it. I'll think about it, I said. Marcus rolled away from me. His disappointment was palpable. You've gotten so cold lately. You used to be generous. I'm still generous, I said to his back. I just want to understand where the money is actually going. He didn't respond. We lay there in silence until he fell asleep. I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, calculating how much longer I needed to wait before everything was ready. 3 days later, I gave Marcus the $25,000. He transferred it to Vanessa that afternoon, and I sent every screenshot to Catherine with a note. Total is now $472,000. If you're still with me, stay with me. Because what I did next is the reason I'm telling you this story. The plan Catherine and I developed wasn't just about divorcing Marcus or getting my money back. It was about creating a moment of revelation so complete, so undeniable that no one could ever claim they didn't know what had happened. We needed witnesses. We needed documentation. We needed perfect timing. September came. I closed the biggest deal of my career, a commercial complex in downtown Manhattan. My commission was $1.8 million. I told Marcus it was $400,000. He never verified because he'd never actually paid attention to my career beyond what it could give him. I also hired a private investigator named Sarah Chen. Sarah's specialty was digital forensics and surveillance. I gave her one job: document Marcus and Vanessa. I needed more than text messages and bank transfers. I needed proof of their relationship that would be undeniable in any legal setting. Sarah was worth every penny I paid her. Within 2 weeks, she had photos of Marcus and Vanessa together in Cleveland, romantic dinners, holding hands in public, kissing in the parking lot of her apartment complex, time-stamped, geotagged, admissible in court. But the real gold was what Sarah found in Marcus's digital footprint. He'd been sloppy about covering his tracks because he'd assumed I was too trusting or too stupid to look. Emails discussing his plans to leave me once Vanessa's daughter graduated college. Text messages where he laughed with Vanessa about how easy it was to manipulate me into funding their relationship. Voice memos he'd saved where Vanessa coached him on what to say to get more money from me. Catherine added it all to the case file, which was now 4 inches thick. The prosecutor reviewed everything and confirmed what we'd suspected. Marcus's actions met the legal definition of fraud and embezzlement. The money he'd taken wasn't community property being used for legitimate purposes. It was systematically stolen through deception and manipulation. We can file charges whenever you're ready, the prosecutor told me. Her name was Diane Morrison, and she'd been practicing family financial crimes for 20 years. But you should know that once we do this, there's no going back. His life will be destroyed. He'll likely face jail time. His family will be publicly humiliated. What about my money? I asked. Full restitution will be part of any plea or sentence, and in the civil case, you'll likely recover everything plus damages. But Alina, I need to know you're sure, because this level of prosecution is rare. Most people just want to move on. I thought about Sunday dinners, about being called cold for wanting to understand where my money went, about Marcus lying to my face while planning his future with another woman, about Patricia's casual cruelty and Jennifer's contempt, about being treated as a resource rather than a person for 3 solid years. I'm sure, I said. We set the date for November 12th, a Sunday, the Sunday after Patricia's 72nd birthday, which the family was planning to celebrate with a formal dinner at the estate. Marcus had already told me to block the date, that attendance was mandatory, that it was important to his mother. Perfect. Catherine filed the divorce papers on November 10th. They were served to Marcus at his office on Friday afternoon. Standard procedure, he had to be served first before we could move forward with anything else. But here's what Marcus didn't know. The divorce papers contained detailed financial disclosures that mentioned improper transfer of marital assets to third parties without naming Vanessa specifically. Marcus came home that evening shaking with rage. Alina, what the hell is this? I was in the kitchen, making dinner like it was a normal Friday. What is what? These divorce papers, this claim about financial impropriety. What are you accusing me of? I turned to face him. He was holding the papers like they might bite him. His face was red, his hands trembling. I'm not accusing you of anything, Marcus. I'm stating facts. You've transferred funds to third parties without my knowledge or consent. That's documented in our bank records. Those were loans to colleagues, emergency situations. You approved all of them, did I? I approved loans to David Richardson for his sister's heart surgery, to Michael for his son's education. But neither David nor Michael exist, do they? He went very still. What are you talking about? I'm talking about Vanessa, Marcus. I'm talking about the $472,000 you've sent her over the last 3 years. I'm talking about every lie you've told me, every manipulation, every time you looked me in the eye and pretended to be helping a colleague when you were really funding your relationship with your ex-girlfriend. His face did something complicated. Shock, then denial, then calculation. I could see him trying to figure out how much I knew, how much I could prove. Alina, you're confused. I can explain. Don't. I held up my hand. Don't insult me by trying to explain. I have the text messages. I have the emails. I have photos of you and Vanessa together in Cleveland. I have voice recordings where she coaches you on what to say to get more money from me. I have everything, Marcus. He sank into a chair at the kitchen table. How long have you known? Long enough to build a very thorough case. Alina, please, let me explain what happened. Vanessa was in a bad situation. I don't care about Vanessa's situation. I care that my husband stole from me, lied to me, and treated me like an ATM while planning his future with another woman. I never planned, that's not, we were just friends. You told her you'd leave me once her daughter graduated. That's in the text, Marcus, your words. He put his head in his hands. We sat in silence for a long moment, then he looked up. What do you want? Money, I'll pay it back, all of it. Just Alina, please don't do this. Think about what it will do to my family. Your family, I repeated. The family that has treated me like garbage for 3 years while I funded their lifestyle. That family, they didn't know about Vanessa. No, they just knew about their own exploitation. Your mother knew every time she asked me for money for the estate while treating me like I was beneath her. Jennifer knew every time she took my checks without saying thank you. And you knew, Marcus, you knew the whole time exactly what you were doing. He was crying now, actual tears. Please, I'll do anything. Just tell me what you want. I wanted justice. I wanted vindication. I wanted everyone who'd watched the Harringtons use me to know exactly what had happened. But I couldn't tell Marcus that, not yet. I want you at your mother's birthday dinner on Sunday. I want you to act like everything is normal. Can you do that? He looked confused. That's it. You want me at dinner? That's what I want right now. We'll discuss the rest later. He agreed. Of course he agreed. He thought he was getting a reprieve, a chance to fix things. He thought Sunday dinner was a negotiation opportunity. He had no idea Sunday dinner was going to be his public execution. That weekend, I prepared meticulously. Catherine, Richard, Diane, and Sarah met me at my office on Saturday morning. We went through everything one more time: the evidence, the timeline, the presentation. Diane had coordinated with local police to have officers on standby near the estate, just in case Marcus tried to run or things got violent. Sarah had prepared a presentation package with all the photos and documents organized chronologically. Richard had a full accounting of every dollar, where it went, and how it was obtained. Catherine had the legal documents ready: divorce papers, restraining orders, criminal complaint, everything we might need. You're sure about the venue? Diane asked. We can do this at the courthouse. It doesn't have to be public. It has to be public, I said. They humiliated me in front of family for 3 years. They get exposed in front of family. Catherine nodded. Then we're ready. Are you ready? I thought about that question. Was I ready to destroy my husband's life, to humiliate his family, to become the woman who brought criminal charges against her spouse for financial fraud? Yes, I was ready. Sunday morning, I dressed carefully. Nothing too formal, nothing that would signal anything unusual. Just a nice dress suitable for a family birthday dinner. I did my makeup. I styled my hair. I looked in the mirror and barely recognized the woman looking back. She looked calm, determined, dangerous. Marcus was a wreck. He'd barely slept, I could tell. His eyes were red and his hands shook slightly as he knotted his tie. Alina, about Friday, can we talk after dinner? I said. We'll talk after dinner. He accepted this because he thought he understood what was happening. He thought I was softening, that family time would remind me of what we had, that his mother's birthday would be an inappropriate time for conflict. He was so wrong. We arrived at the estate at 5:30. Dinner was at 6. Patricia greeted us at the door, all smiles for her birthday celebration. Jennifer was already there with her current boyfriend, a man named Derek who worked in finance and treated Jennifer like she was doing him a favor by dating him. The dining room was set formally. Patricia's good china, the family silver, candles, and flowers. 12 places set because Patricia had invited some of her society friends to round out the party. Perfect. The more witnesses, the better. We made small talk. Happy birthday, Patricia. How lovely everything looks. Yes, thank you. I did help with the arrangements. No, the earrings aren't new. I've had them for years. Normal family dinner conversation that felt like walking through a dream where everyone was speaking lines from a script I'd already read. Dinner was served. The first course was soup. Patricia sat at the head of the table, Marcus to her right, me next to Marcus, Jennifer across from us with Derek. Patricia's friends scattered around, making polite conversation about the weather and upcoming charity events. I waited until the main course was served: roasted chicken, the estate's signature dish. Everyone had food on their plates, wine in their glasses. The conversation was flowing. Patricia was holding court, telling a story about her youth that everyone had heard a dozen times. Then I set down my fork. The sound was quiet, but in the lull of Patricia's story, it caught attention. Marcus looked at me. His eyes were pleading. Don't do this, they said. Not here, not now. I reached into my purse and pulled out a manila envelope. I set it on the table next to my plate. Patricia stopped mid-sentence. Alina, dear, is everything all right? Actually, Patricia, I have a birthday gift for you. For everyone, really, it's the gift of truth. Marcus's hand shot out, grabbing my wrist under the table. Alina, I pulled away from him. Don't touch me. My voice was calm, but the entire table heard it. Conversation stopped. Every eye turned toward us. I opened the envelope and pulled out a document. This is a complete accounting of every dollar I've given the Harrington family over the last 3 years. $378,000 to be exact. Written checks, transferred funds, loans that were never repaid, all documented here. Patricia's face hardened. Alina, this is hardly the time. Oh, but it is the perfect time. Because you see, I've spent 3 years attending these dinners, writing these checks, being treated like an inconvenient bank while pretending to be family. And I think everyone here should know exactly how this family operates. Jennifer stood up. You can't talk to my mother like that. Sit down, Jennifer. I'm just getting started. I pulled out another document. This is a record of Marcus's transfers to his ex-girlfriend Vanessa. $472,000 over 3 years. Money he stole from our joint account through systematic lying and deception. Money I earned while he pretended to have a career. The room exploded. Marcus was trying to speak, Patricia was demanding I leave, Jennifer was calling me insane, Derek looked like he wanted to disappear, and Patricia's society friends were watching with the horrified fascination of people witnessing a car crash. I raised my voice. I have documentation of everything: bank statements, text messages, emails, photographs. Marcus has been conducting an affair with Vanessa Crawford, funding it with money he fraudulently obtained from me, while planning to leave me once her daughter graduated from college. All while his family treated me like I was too stupid to notice what was happening. Marcus found his voice. That's not Alina, you're twisting everything. I pulled out my phone. These are text messages between you and Vanessa. Would you like me to read them aloud? The ones where she thanks you for the $25,000 for her daughter's tuition. The ones where you laugh about how easy it is to manipulate your wife. Ones where you discuss your future together once you've extracted enough money to make the divorce worthwhile. His face went completely white, not pale white, like every drop of blood had drained away. Patricia recovered first. Get out of my house. Get out now before I call the police. I smiled. It was not a nice smile. By all means, call them, because they're already on their way. I filed criminal fraud charges against Marcus on Friday. The divorce papers he was served were just the beginning. This, I tapped the envelope, is evidence in a criminal case. Your son is facing felony charges for embezzlement and fraud. The room went silent, not the kind of silence where people are processing information, the kind of silence where reality has just shifted and nobody knows how to exist in the new version. Marcus made a sound, not quite a word, not quite a cry. His mother turned to look at him, and in her face I saw the moment she realized I wasn't bluffing. Jennifer sat down slowly, her earlier bravado completely gone. Alina, Patricia's voice was different now, smaller. Surely we can discuss this privately, as a family. We're not family, Patricia, we never were. I was a revenue stream that you all tapped while treating me with contempt. But here's what you didn't know. While I was writing all those checks, I was also building a separate account under my maiden name. I currently have $2.3 million in assets that Marcus never knew existed. I'm not the desperate, dependent wife you all assumed I was. I'm the woman who funded your delusions while planning your destruction. One of Patricia's friends actually gasped. The sound would have been funny under different circumstances. Catherine chose that moment to arrive. I'd given her the timing earlier. She walked into the dining room with Richard right behind her. Mrs. Harrington, I'm Catherine Stone, Alina's attorney. These are the official divorce papers with full financial disclosure. And this, she handed a document to Marcus, is notice of the criminal complaint filed with the prosecutor's office. You have the right to legal representation. I suggest you exercise that right immediately. Richard handed packets to Patricia and Jennifer. These are civil suits for repayment of all funds obtained through false pretenses. You have 30 days to respond. Marcus finally found words. Mom, I swear, I didn't. She's lying about. Am I lying about Vanessa? I pulled out my phone again and opened the photo album Sarah had compiled. I slid the phone across the table to Patricia. September 23rd, Marcus and Vanessa at Cafe Muse in Cleveland. September 24th, same weekend, outside her apartment. October 5th, at a hotel in Columbus, all while he was telling me he was at work conferences. Patricia looked at the photos. Her hand trembled. She set the phone down carefully and turned to her son. Marcus, tell me she's lying. He couldn't. The evidence was literally on the table between them. Jennifer broke the silence. This is insane. Alina, you're destroying this family over money. I'm holding this family accountable for theft and fraud. There's a difference, Jennifer. And speaking of accountability, that BMW you drive, the one I paid for when you couldn't make the payments, it's registered in your name, but I have documentation that you claimed the money was a gift when it was actually a loan. I'll be adding that to your civil suit. Same for the $28,000 in landscaping money that Patricia spent on luxury garden design while claiming it was necessary property maintenance. Derek stood up. Jennifer, I think we should go. "Sit down, Derek," Jennifer snapped, but he didn't. He walked out, smart man. The next 30 minutes were chaos. Patricia tried to negotiate, offering to pay everything back if I'd drop the charges. Catherine explained that criminal charges, once filed, couldn't be dropped by the victim. Marcus tried to leave and found two police officers in the foyer. Diane had timed their arrival perfectly. Patricia's society friends made hasty excuses and fled, probably already composing the gossip that spread through their social circles by morning. Jennifer cried, real tears this time, not manipulative ones. She'd finally understood that her lifestyle was over, that the money tree she'd been shaking for 3 years had not only stopped producing but was actively pressing charges. Marcus was arrested at his mother's birthday dinner. The officers were professional and polite, but handcuffs are handcuffs regardless of how kindly they're applied. He looked at me as they walked him out. "Alina, please don't do this. Think about what we had." "I am thinking about it, Marcus. I'm thinking about 3 years of lies, theft, and betrayal. I'm thinking about every time you looked me in the eye and manipulated me into funding your affair. I'm thinking about all of it. That's exactly why I'm doing this." He was gone. The police car pulled away from the estate with him in the back seat. Patricia collapsed into her chair at the head of the table, the birthday dinner forgotten, the celebration turned to ash. Jennifer stood frozen, still holding the civil suit papers like they might transform into something less terrible if she stared at them long enough. I gathered my things. Catherine and Richard flanked me like bodyguards. As I walked toward the door, Patricia spoke. "Alina." Wait, I turned. She looked old suddenly. Not elegant old money old, but genuinely aged, like the last hour had added years to her face. "Was any of it real?" she asked. "Did you ever actually care about this family?" I thought about that question. About Sunday dinners and written checks and casual cruelty. About being called cold and difficult and ungrateful while I funded their entire lifestyle. About 3 years of hoping they'd see me as a person rather than a resource. "I did," I said. "For longer than I should have, but the real question, Patricia, is did you ever care about me? Or was I always just the woman with money who married your son?" She didn't answer. She couldn't answer because we both knew the truth. I left the estate that night and never went back. Catherine drove me home. Richard followed in his own car to make sure I got there safely. They came inside, made sure I was okay, went through the next steps one more time. Criminal trial would take months. Civil suits would proceed in parallel. I'd likely get full restitution eventually, but it would be a process. "How do you feel?" Catherine asked before she left. I thought about that. I didn't feel triumphant exactly, but I didn't feel guilty either. I felt clear, like I'd been looking through cloudy water for years and someone had finally drained the pool. "I feel like I can breathe," I said. "Good," Catherine said, "because tomorrow the media is going to pick this up. Prominent family, fraud charges, dramatic arrest at a society dinner. This is going to be news. Are you ready for that?" "I've been ready for months," I said. She was right about the media. By Monday morning, the story was everywhere. Local news picked it up first, then regional, then national. The Harrington name, which Patricia had been so desperate to protect, became synonymous with fraud and exploitation. Social media had a field day. I became a folk hero in certain circles, the woman who documented everything and brought down her fraudulent husband and his entitled family. The attention was overwhelming, but Catherine had prepared me for it. I didn't give interviews. I didn't comment on social media. I let the court documents speak for themselves and focused on my work, my real work, the career I'd built while being systematically robbed by people who were supposed to love me. Marcus took a plea deal 4 months later. He pled guilty to fraud and embezzlement, agreed to full restitution of the $472,000 he'd stolen, plus damages. His sentence was 3 years in minimum security prison followed by 5 years probation. Part of the plea was a permanent restraining order preventing him from contacting me ever again. Patricia and Jennifer settled their civil suits rather than go to trial. Full repayment of everything I'd given them, plus 20% in damages and all legal fees. Patricia had to take out a reverse mortgage on the estate to pay. Jennifer had to sell the BMW and move into a studio apartment in a neighborhood she'd previously called beneath her. The divorce was finalized 6 months after that November dinner. I got everything because there was nothing to divide. All the marital assets had been mine to begin with. Marcus's lawyer tried to argue for alimony. Catherine laughed in his face and presented documentation of every fraudulent transfer. The judge denied the request. Vanessa was never charged criminally because she hadn't technically done anything illegal. She just accepted money from Marcus, not knowing it was stolen from his wife. But her name was in all the court documents, all the media coverage. Her daughter lost her scholarship at Ohio State due to the scandal. Last I heard, Vanessa had moved to a different state to escape the attention. I sold the house Marcus and I had shared and bought a penthouse downtown. Decorated it exactly how I wanted, with art I chose and furniture I loved. No Sunday dinners, no checking with anyone about my choices, just me, my space, my life. My career flourished in the aftermath. If anything, the publicity helped. People respected the fact that I'd documented everything, that I'd been strategic rather than emotional, that I'd held people accountable using the legal system rather than social media rage. I got referrals from other women who'd been financially exploited, who wanted an agent who understood the value of thorough documentation and strategic planning. A year after the divorce, Catherine and I had lunch at the same restaurant where she'd first helped me plan my asset protection strategy. Any regrets? She asked. I thought about it honestly. Did I regret the public humiliation, the media coverage, the nuclear option I'd chosen instead of a quiet divorce? No, I said. They needed to face consequences, real consequences. Not just a divorce settlement they could spin as mutual differences. They needed everyone to know what they'd done. And Marcus, any contact, none. The restraining order holds. I heard he got out of prison last month. Diane told me he's working as an insurance adjuster in Florida now, using his mother's maiden name to avoid the Google results. Catherine smiled. Good, and you, how's the business? Best year ever. I'm on track to close 38 million this year. And this time I raised my wine glass. Every penny of my commission goes exactly where I want it to go. We toasted to that, to freedom, to justice, to the power of documentation and the importance of knowing your worth. I still see Jennifer occasionally. The city isn't that big and we run in overlapping professional circles. She doesn't acknowledge me when we cross paths. I don't acknowledge her. We exist in the same space like strangers, which I suppose is what we always were. Patricia died 2 years after that November dinner. Heart attack, sudden and massive. I didn't go to the funeral. Marcus was there, I heard, but I wasn't. I'd said everything I needed to say to that family. I had nothing to add to their grief. Sometimes people ask me if I think I went too far, if criminal charges were necessary, if I could have just divorced Marcus quietly and moved on with my life. The answer is no. Because quietly moving on would have meant they never faced real consequences. It would have meant Patricia could tell her friends that Marcus and I simply weren't compatible. It would have meant Jennifer could continue believing that people existed to fund her lifestyle. It would have meant Marcus could do the same thing to his next victim. Instead, they all learned a very expensive lesson about respect, accountability, and the importance of not underestimating the woman writing your checks. And everyone who witnessed their downfall learned something too. Document everything, know your worth, and never let anyone treat you like you're too stupid to notice what they're doing. I'm 44 now, single, successful, happy in a way I never was during those 3 years of Sunday dinners and strategic silence. I have friends who value me, colleagues who respect me, a career I've built entirely on my own terms. I have my penthouse and my financial freedom and my peace of mind. And I have the satisfaction of knowing that when people search the Harrington name now, they don't find old money prestige. They find court documents detailing exactly what happens when you exploit the wrong woman. Was it worth it? Every single dollar, every hour of documentation, every minute of strategic planning, because I didn't just get justice, I got vindication. I got proof that I wasn't crazy, wasn't imagining the exploitation, wasn't overreacting to their cruelty. I got the truth on public record, undeniable and permanent, and honestly, that's worth more than any of the money I recovered. Though I'll admit, getting the money back was pretty satisfying too. I thought I knew what winning looked like. I thought it was that moment at Patricia's birthday dinner when Marcus got arrested, when the whole family's facade shattered in front of witnesses. But I was wrong. Winning wasn't one moment. It was a series of calculated moves that happened before anyone knew the game had started. 2 weeks after that dinner, Marcus's attorney called Catherine. They wanted to negotiate. Marcus was willing to agree to the divorce, to partial restitution if I would drop the criminal charges and agree to a confidentiality clause. No public statements, no media interviews, sealed court records. Catherine relayed the message while we sat in her office. They're scared, she said. The media coverage is killing them. Patricia's society friends have stopped returning her calls. Jennifer lost her gallery position. They want this to go away quietly. What did you tell them? That I'd present the offer to you. What do you want to do? I thought about Patricia's face when the police led Marcus out. I thought about Jennifer's tears and Derek's hasty exit. I thought about 3 years of Sunday dinners and casual cruelty. Set up a mediation. Tell them I'm willing to discuss terms. Catherine's eyebrow went up. Are you actually willing to negotiate? No. But they don't need to know that yet. The mediation was scheduled for the following Tuesday at a neutral location, a conference room in a downtown law office. Catherine, Richard, and Diane all came with me. Marcus arrived with his attorney, a man named Gerald Hoffman who specialized in white-collar criminal defense. Patricia came too, though she wasn't technically a party to the criminal case. She sat in the corner like a spectator at her son's execution. Sat across from each other at a long conference table. Marcus looked terrible. He'd lost weight, his suit hung on him wrong, and there were dark circles under his eyes that makeup couldn't hide. For a brief moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Then I remembered Vanessa's text and the feeling evaporated. Gerald started. My client is prepared to make a generous offer, full restitution of the funds in question, a formal apology, and an agreement to attend counseling for gambling addiction. Gambling addiction? I kept my voice neutral. That's the position we'll be taking in court. Marcus had a problem, he made poor choices, but it was an illness, not malicious intent. I looked at Marcus. He wouldn't meet my eyes. So Vanessa was what, a symptom of gambling addiction? Gerald cleared his throat. The affair is separate from the financial issues. But in the interest of reaching an amicable resolution, my client is willing to accept full responsibility and make things right financially. In exchange for dropping the criminal charges, sealing the divorce records, a mutual non-disparagement agreement, and a structured payment plan for the restitution rather than a lump sum. Catherine started to speak, but I put my hand on her arm. I turned to Marcus. Look at me. He did finally. His eyes were red-rimmed and desperate. You want me to let you off the hook, to let you rewrite this as a gambling problem instead of deliberate theft and deception, to keep quiet about what you did so your family can salvage their reputation. Is that right? Marcus's voice came out hoarse. Alina, please, I made mistakes, terrible mistakes, but destroying my entire life won't fix anything. We can both move forward if I just what? Pretend the last 3 years didn't happen. Pretend you didn't steal almost $500,000. Pretend you didn't plan your entire future with another woman while I funded your family's delusions. Patricia spoke from the corner. Alina, dear, surely you can see that public vindication isn't worth ruining a man's entire future. I turned to face her. She was wearing her pearls, the real ones, the ones she claimed had been in the family for generations, but which I'd later discovered Marcus had pawned, and I'd unknowingly bought back for $38,000 2 years ago. Patricia, you're not part of these negotiations. You're here as what exactly? Moral support for the son who committed felonies? Her face tightened. I'm here as his mother, and I'm asking you, woman to woman, to show some mercy. You want to talk about mercy, woman to woman? I pulled out my phone and opened my notes app. I'd prepared for this. Let's talk about mercy. June 22nd, 2 years ago, Sunday dinner. I mentioned I was tired because I'd closed a major deal and worked 70 hours that week. You told me I should try working a real job instead of glorified sales. Do you remember that? Patricia blinked. I don't recall. I do. I remember every single dismissive comment, every casual cruelty, every time you treated me like I was too stupid to notice what you were all doing. So when you ask me for mercy, woman to woman, I want you to understand something. I gave you mercy every single Sunday for 3 years. I gave you my money, my time, my patience, and my silence. The mercy period is over. Gerald tried to regain control. Mrs. Harrington, I understand you're upset, but emotion aside, this is a business negotiation. My client is offering full restitution. Over how long? Richard cut in. He'd been silent until now, but his tone was sharp. Gerald hesitated. We were thinking a 5-year payment plan. So Marcus pays roughly $94,000 per year for 5 years while continuing to work and rebuild his life, while Alina waits for money that's already hers. That's not restitution. That's a payment plan for merchandise he already stole. My client's earning capacity has been severely impacted by these accusations, by his crimes, Catherine corrected. Let's use accurate language. Your client committed fraud and embezzlement. These aren't accusations. We have documented evidence that he's already pled guilty to in exchange for the plea deal he's trying to negotiate out of. The room went quiet. Marcus's hands were shaking. He clasped them together on the table, trying to hide it, but I saw everything now. Gerald pulled out a folder. We've prepared a settlement agreement. If Mrs. Harrington would just review. I didn't reach for the folder. Instead, I pulled out my own documents. I set them on the table carefully, one at a time. Bank statements showing the separate account Marcus didn't know about. Screenshots of his messages with Vanessa from the last month where he discussed hiding assets and claiming poverty. Records showing he'd opened a new credit card in his mother's name 2 weeks after his arrest. What is this? Gerald's voice had lost its confidence. This is what your client has been doing since his arrest. Hiding money, planning his defense, opening lines of credit in his mother's name to fund his legal fees. And this, I pulled out another document, is a forensic analysis showing that the gambling addiction story is fabricated. Marcus has no gambling history, no casino visits, no online betting accounts. The story is a lie designed to generate sympathy. Patricia stood up. That's not Marcus. Tell them that's not true. Marcus looked at his mother. Then he looked at me. Then he looked down at the table. He said nothing. I let my voice soften, let it sound tired. Gerald, here's what I'm willing to do. Marcus pleads guilty as planned. Full restitution as a lump sum due within 90 days. He serves his sentence. And in exchange, I'll agree to seal the divorce records and sign a non-disparagement agreement that prevents me from giving media interviews about the details. Gerald leaned forward. That's more reasonable. If we can just adjust the restitution timeline, I'm not finished. I pulled out another document. This one I slid across to Marcus directly. This is a full accounting of every dollar your family has taken from me over 3 years, $378,000 to your mother and sister. I'm adding them as defendants in the civil suit. They pay back every penny with interest, or I pursue criminal fraud charges against them as well. Patricia made a sound. Not quite a gasp, not quite a cry. You can't, we're not involved in Marcus's. You're involved in your own exploitation, I said. I looked directly at her. Every check I wrote you for the estate, for the landscaping, for the country club, those were obtained through false pretenses. You claimed they were necessary expenses when they were luxury purchases. You claimed family emergency when it was social vanity. That's fraud, Patricia, and I have documentation of every instance. Gerald was reading the document I'd slid to Marcus. His face was changing, going from professional composure to genuine concern. Mrs. Harrington, I need to consult with my client privately. Take all the time you need. I stood up. My hands were shaking slightly. I let them shake. Let everyone in the room see them tremble. I'll give you 15 minutes to discuss, but understand this, the offer I just made is the only offer. If you walk out that door without signing, the criminal trial proceeds as scheduled. The civil suits expand to include everyone, and I spend every dollar I have making sure the entire country knows exactly what the Harrington family is. Catherine, Richard, Diane, and I stepped into the hallway. The moment the door closed behind us, Catherine turned to me. Alina, you're not actually offering them a deal. You gave them impossible terms. I gave them a choice. Accept accountability or face total destruction. They'll never agree to lump sum restitution. Marcus doesn't have that kind of money. Neither does Patricia. I know. I pulled out my phone and checked the time. But they don't know that I know, and right now in that room they're discussing how to get the money. They're calling accountants and attorneys and probably Patricia's wealthier friends. They're scrambling, and while they scramble, they're not preparing their defense. They're not building their case. They're doing exactly what I need them to do. Richard caught on first. You're running out the clock on their plea deal. Plea offer expires in 72 hours. If Marcus doesn't accept it, he goes to trial. And a trial means every detail becomes public record. Every text message, every photo of him and Vanessa, every fraudulent transfer. Patricia's society friends will have a field day. Diane was smiling now. You set them up. This whole mediation was theater. They wanted to negotiate. I let them think negotiation was possible. But the only thing I'm actually negotiating is how much they said. I looked back at the closed conference room door. In 15 minutes, I'm going back in there and I'm going to perform. I'm going to look conflicted and tired and maybe even sad. I'm going to make them think I might bend. And then tomorrow, when Marcus's attorney calls Catherine to try to adjust the terms, we're going to tell them the offer has expired. Catherine shook her head slowly. You're terrifying. I'm thorough. There's a difference. We gave them 20 minutes instead of 15. When we returned to the conference room, the atmosphere had changed. Patricia was crying quietly in the corner. Marcus looked hollowed out. Gerald's professional composure was cracked around the edges. I sat down across from them, folded my hands on the table, let my expression soften into something that might be interpreted as sympathy. Have you reached a decision? Gerald spoke carefully. My client would like to accept your offer with some modifications to the payment timeline. If we could structure the restitution as, I held up my hand, let it shake, not much, just enough to be visible. I'm going to be honest with you, with all of you. I looked at Marcus, then at Patricia. I'm tired of fighting, tired of being angry, tired of all of this. Part of me wants to just walk away, let you figure out your own consequences and move on with my life. I saw hope flicker in Marcus's eyes, saw Patricia lean forward slightly, but I can't. I let my voice crack just slightly, perfectly calculated, perfectly placed. Because if I walk away now, nothing changes. You learn that consequences are negotiable, that if you just wait long enough, push hard enough, the woman you hurt will give in because she's tired, and I won't teach you that lesson. I pulled out a pen, set it on the table next to the settlement document I'd brought. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to sign this agreement. Full restitution within 90 days, criminal plea as scheduled, sealed divorce records, civil suits against Patricia and Jennifer proceed unless they settle independently. Those are my terms. They are non-negotiable. Gerald started to speak. I kept talking. Or you walk out that door, you try to negotiate further, and tomorrow morning I withdraw the offer to seal the divorce records. I withdraw the non-disparagement agreement. And I spend the next 6 months making sure every person in your social circle, your professional network, and your community knows exactly what you did and exactly what you are. The room was silent, not the silence of consideration, the silence of checkmate. Marcus reached for the pen. His hand was shaking worse than mine. Where do I sign? I slid the document across to him, pointed to the signature line, watched as he signed his name in unsteady script. Gerald witnessed it with visible reluctance. Patricia watched from the corner, still crying, making no move to intervene. When it was done, I collected the signed document, stood up, extended my hand to Marcus across the table. He stared at it for a moment, confused, then took it. His palm was clammy. Thank you for taking accountability, I said. My voice was steady now, all trace of trembling gone. I genuinely hope you become a better person after this. I turned and walked out. Catherine, Richard, and Diane followed. We made it to the elevator before anyone spoke. Did you just thank him? Diane asked. Manners cost nothing, I said, and it'll haunt him more than anything else I could have said. We rode down to the parking garage in silence. As we reached our cars, Catherine touched my arm. Alina, that performance in there, the trembling hands, the crack in your voice, that was acting, right? I looked at her. Let her see my face, completely calm, completely steady. What do you think? She laughed, actually laughed. I think Marcus Harrington never stood a chance. No, I agreed, he really didn't. 3 days later, Marcus's attorney called to try to renegotiate the payment timeline. Catherine told him the offer had expired and hung up. The criminal case proceeded to trial because Marcus's plea deal window had closed while he was busy trying to negotiate impossible terms with me. And that's how I ended up in a courtroom 8 weeks later, watching my husband's life get systematically dismantled in front of a judge, a prosecutor, a defense attorney, and a gallery full of spectators, including several journalists who followed the case from the beginning. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Wood paneling, uncomfortable benches, fluorescent lights that made everyone look slightly jaundiced. I sat in the front row behind the prosecutor's table. Catherine sat next to me even though she wasn't required to be there. Moral support, she'd said. And I want to see his face when the sentence comes down. Marcus sat at the defense table in a gray suit that looked borrowed. Gerald sat next to him, shuffling papers with the air of a man who knew he was about to lose. Patricia was in the gallery 3 rows back, wearing black like she was already in mourning. Jennifer hadn't come. Smart girl, finally. The prosecutor was a woman named Amanda Chen, sharp and efficient, with a reputation for methodical case building. She laid out the evidence like she was teaching a class. Bank statements on the overhead projector, text message threads read aloud, photos of Marcus and Vanessa displayed for the court. Each piece of evidence was time-stamped, documented, undeniable. Gerald tried to mount a defense. He called character witnesses who testified that Marcus was a good man who'd made mistakes. He presented the gambling addiction narrative, complete with an expert witness who testified about addiction patterns. He painted Marcus as a victim of his own weakness rather than a calculating thief. Amanda dismantled it in cross-examination. The expert admitted he'd never actually evaluated Marcus, was working solely from Gerald's description of symptoms. The character witnesses admitted under questioning that they hadn't known about Vanessa or the stolen money. One by one, Gerald's defense points collapsed. Then Amanda called me to the stand. I'd testified before in business disputes, contract disagreements, but this was different. This was personal. I walked to the witness stand in a navy suit, simple jewelry, minimal makeup. I wanted to look professional, credible, unremarkable. Amanda asked me to describe my marriage. I did in careful chronological detail, how we met, how he pursued me, how the family dynamic became clear. She asked me about the money. I provided specifics. Dates, amounts, what I was told the money was for versus what it was actually used for. Mrs. Harrington, when did you first suspect your husband was being dishonest about his financial requests? March 15th, 2 years ago. I came home early and overheard him on the phone with Vanessa Crawford. He told her he couldn't send more money because I watched every penny, which wasn't true. That discrepancy made me start paying closer attention. And what did you find when you started paying attention? I described opening his laptop, finding the messages, discovering the transfers. I described tracking additional instances, documenting everything, building the case. My voice stayed level, factual, showing no emotion. Gerald cross-examined me. Mrs. Harrington, isn't it true that you earn significantly more than my client? Yes. And isn't it true that in your marriage you were the primary breadwinner? Yes. So when my client asked you for money, he was simply doing what many spouses do, relying on the higher earner's income for family needs. If the money had been used for family needs, I would agree with you. But it wasn't. It was used to fund a relationship with another woman while lying to me about the purpose of the transfers. But you can't deny that you willingly gave him access to your accounts, willingly provided money when asked. I provided money based on false information. That's not willing consent, that's fraud. Gerald tried several more angles, tried to paint me as controlling, as vindictive, as a woman scorned who was using the legal system for revenge. I answered each question calmly, factually, letting the evidence speak. When I stepped down from the stand, I caught Marcus's eyes. He looked away immediately. The trial lasted 3 days. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they came back, the forewoman stood and read the verdict, guilty on all counts. The sentencing hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. I didn't attend. Catherine went on my behalf and called me afterward with the results. Marcus got 4 years in prison, not the 3 from the plea deal he'd tried to negotiate out of. Full restitution ordered to be paid within 60 days or additional penalties would apply. 5 years probation after release, permanent restraining order preventing him from contacting me. He cried when the judge read the sentence, Catherine told me. Patricia made a scene, had to be escorted out by bailiffs. And the restitution, that's where it gets interesting. He doesn't have the money. Patricia's trying to get a home equity loan on the estate, but with her credit history and the property's existing mortgages, no bank will touch it. They have 60 days to come up with $472,000 or the court starts seizing assets. I thought about that, about Patricia's estate, the family home she guarded so jealously, being sold at auction to pay her son's debts. About Jennifer watching her mother lose everything because of her brother's crimes. About the Harrington name becoming synonymous with fraud instead of old money prestige. Good, I said. The civil suits against Patricia and Jennifer settled 3 weeks later. Patricia couldn't get the loan for the estate, so she sold it instead. The property went for less than it should have. Motivated sellers never get fair value. but it was enough to cover both Marcus's restitution and her own settlement with me. $378,000 paid back in full, plus $22,000 in interest and legal fees. Jennifer sold everything she had. The BMW went first, then her jewelry, then her furniture. She moved into a studio apartment in a neighborhood she'd previously called aggressively middle class and got a job as a receptionist at a dental office. Her social media presence, which had once been carefully curated images of gallery openings and luxury brunches, went silent. I saw her once, about 6 months after the settlements were finalized. We crossed paths at a coffee shop downtown. She was in line ahead of me, counting out change for a small coffee, clearly not able to afford the latte she used to drink. She saw me, our eyes met. I waited for her to speak, to say something cutting or cruel, to reclaim some small piece of superiority. Instead, she just looked away and took her coffee to a corner table. I ordered my usual, a large latte with an extra shot, and sat at a table on the opposite side of the shop. I didn't go over to her, didn't speak. We existed in the same space like strangers, which I suppose was more honest than pretending we'd ever been family. Patricia's health declined rapidly after selling the estate. The stress of the trial, the public humiliation, the loss of her home, it aged her in ways that time alone couldn't account for. She moved into a modest condo that Jennifer helped her afford, a 2-bedroom place with no yard and thin walls. Her society friends stopped calling. The charities she'd supported dropped her from their boards. She'd spent her whole life building a reputation, and it evaporated in less than a year. She died 18 months after Marcus went to prison. Heart attack, sudden and massive. I got a notification because I was still listed as next of kin in some of her medical paperwork that had never been updated. I didn't go to the funeral. Marcus was granted permission to attend in handcuffs and a prison jumpsuit. That image made the local news. The Harrington family's final public appearance was Marcus in chains, saying goodbye to his mother. I didn't feel triumphant when I saw that photo. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt tired and ready to be done with all of it. The divorce was finalized 10 months after the criminal trial concluded. I got everything because there was nothing to divide. The house we'd shared sold quickly. I priced it below market value because I wanted it gone, wanted every physical reminder of that marriage erased from my life. I took the money and bought a penthouse in a building downtown with floor-to-ceiling windows and a doorman who screened all visitors. I decorated it exactly how I wanted. Modern furniture, clean lines, art that I chose because I liked it, not because it matched some family aesthetic. I had a home office with 3 monitors and a view of the city skyline. I had a bedroom with blackout curtains and a bed that was mine alone. I had a kitchen I actually cooked in because I wasn't attending mandatory Sunday dinners anymore. My career exploded in the aftermath. The publicity from the trial made me something of a folk hero in certain circles. Women who'd been financially exploited reached out. Business owners who valued thoroughness and documentation wanted to work with me. I closed $42 million in transactions the year after the divorce, more than I'd ever done before. My commission structure improved. My reputation grew. I hired an assistant named Maya who was brilliant and ruthless and reminded me of myself 10 years earlier. I mentored her the way I wished someone had mentored me. I taught her about documentation, about knowing her worth, about never letting anyone treat her like a resource instead of a person. I dated occasionally, nothing serious. I wasn't ready for serious, and I was honest about that. I met people at industry events, had dinners and conversations, enjoyed the company without needing it to become something more. Some people thought I was jaded. I thought I was discerning. There's a difference. 2 years after the divorce, I got a message on LinkedIn. It was from Vanessa. I stared at the notification for a long time before opening it. Part of me wanted to delete it unread. Part of me was curious about what she possibly thought she could say to me. The message was brief. I know you have no reason to listen to me, but I wanted you to know that I didn't know he was married when we reconnected. By the time I found out, I was in too deep financially to walk away. That's not an excuse. It's just the truth. I'm sorry for my part in what happened to you. I read it 3 times, tried to figure out if I believed her, decided it didn't matter whether I believed her or not. She'd been part of the machinery that tried to dismantle my life, intentionally or not, and I didn't owe her forgiveness or understanding. I typed a response, "Thank you for the apology. I hope you've learned from this experience as much as I have." Then I blocked her, not out of anger, just out of completeness. That chapter was closed, and I didn't need any loose threads pulling me back into it. Marcus got out of prison last year. I heard through Catherine, who heard through professional networks, that he'd moved to Florida under his mother's maiden name. He was working as an insurance adjuster, trying to rebuild a life with a new identity in a place where nobody knew the Harrington name or cared about old New York society scandals. Part of me wondered if he'd learned anything, if he understood what he'd done, or if he just saw himself as a victim of circumstances, of his own weakness, of a wife who wouldn't let things go. I'd never know, and I'd decided I didn't need to know. His growth or lack thereof wasn't my responsibility. It held him accountable. What he did with that accountability was his own journey. I still think about those Sunday dinners sometimes. Not with longing, I don't miss them at all, but with a kind of analytical distance. I think about who I was when I attended them, how I stayed silent while being dismissed and degraded, how I wrote checks while being treated like an ATM in a dress. I think about the woman I became through the process of holding them accountable. I'm not that same woman anymore. I'm sharper now, more careful. I document everything, not out of paranoia, but out of principle. I know my worth and I don't compromise it for anyone. I have boundaries that I enforce without apology. I've built a life that's entirely mine, funded by money I earned, decorated to my taste, populated by people I chose because they add value to my existence. Some people think I went too far, that criminal charges were excessive, that destroying an entire family over money was cruel, that I should have just divorced Marcus quietly and moved on. Those people fundamentally misunderstand what happened. This was never about money. Money was just the evidence of the deeper crime, the systematic devaluation of my humanity, the treatment of me as a resource rather than a person, the arrogant assumption that I was too trusting or too stupid to notice what they were doing. I didn't destroy the Harrington family. They destroyed themselves. I just documented it and made sure there were consequences. Last month, I hit a milestone. My net worth crossed $5 million. I celebrated alone in my penthouse with a glass of expensive wine and a view of the city lights. No family dinner, no obligation to share, no one expecting a piece of what I'd built, just me and the satisfaction of knowing that every dollar was mine and mine alone. My assistant Maya asked me once if I had any regrets. We were working late, reviewing contracts for a major deal, and she'd just finished telling me about her own family drama, her own struggles with being undervalued. She looked at me across the conference table and said, "After everything you went through, do you regret marrying him? Do you wish you'd seen the signs earlier and avoided the whole thing?" I thought about that question for a long time. "No," I said finally, "because if I hadn't gone through it, I wouldn't be who I am now. I wouldn't have learned to document everything, to trust my instincts, to know the difference between love and exploitation. The experience was painful, but the knowledge I gained was priceless." She nodded slowly. "So you're saying suffering can be educational?" "I'm saying suffering that you survive and learn from becomes power. The Harringtons thought they were breaking me. They were actually forging me into something they couldn't control or manipulate. That's the part they never understood. I still live in the same penthouse, still close deals and mentor young professionals and build the life I want. I still see Jennifer occasionally at industry events and we still don't acknowledge each other. I still get questions sometimes from journalists who want follow-up interviews about the case that became a cautionary tale about financial abuse in marriage. I don't give those interviews. I said everything I needed to say in court. The rest is just my life, moving forward, unencumbered by the past. The final piece of restitution money came through 14 months after the criminal trial. $472,000 deposited into my account from the estate liquidation and Patricia's settlement. I stared at the balance for a long time. That money represented 3 years of manipulation and lies, 3 years of being used, 3 years of keeping silent while I built my case. I donated half of it to organizations that support women leaving financially abusive relationships. The other half I invested in my business, expanding my team and upgrading my technology infrastructure. I turned money that had been stolen from me into resources for other women and fuel for my own success. It felt like alchemy, like transformation. My name is Alina Harrington, though I've gone back to using my maiden name for most professional purposes. Alina Martinez sounds stronger to me now. Sounds like someone who wasn't defined by a marriage, but by her own choices and achievements. I was a victim. For 3 years, I was systematically exploited by people who should have valued me, but I didn't stay a victim. I became a strategist, a documentarian, and architect of consequences. I took the pain of being underestimated and transformed it into the power of being underestimated right up until the moment I showed them exactly who they'd been dismissing. The judge who sentenced Marcus told him that his greatest mistake wasn't stealing the money. It was assuming his wife wouldn't notice, wouldn't care, or wouldn't act. That quote made it into several news articles about the case. It became the headline that defined the whole story. Man steals from wife, assumes she won't notice, gets 4 years in prison. I framed one of those articles, not out of vindictiveness, but as a reminder that silence isn't always weakness. That documentation is power. That being underestimated is only a disadvantage if you don't use it strategically. If someone had told me 6 years ago, when I married Marcus, that I'd end up here, divorced, wealthy, independent, living exactly the life I wanted with no one to answer to, I wouldn't have believed them. I thought marriage was supposed to be partnership, support, building something together. I learned the hard way that sometimes what looks like partnership is actually exploitation wearing a wedding ring. But I also learned that I'm stronger than I knew, more capable than I believed, more strategic than anyone gave me credit for. The Harringtons tried to use me and found out they'd underestimated the cost of that choice. I hope Marcus thinks about that sometimes, in whatever life he's building in Florida. I hope he remembers the moment in that courtroom when the verdict came down, when he realized that the woman he dismissed as too trusting had actually been gathering evidence for 2 years. I hope he learned something from it, though I suspect he probably just learned to hide things better. I know I learned. I learned that your worth isn't determined by how others treat you. It's determined by how you respond when they treat you poorly. I learned that documentation is love, love for your future self who deserves justice. I learned that strategic patience is more powerful than reactive anger. Most importantly, I learned that walking away isn't always the answer. Sometimes the answer is standing your ground and making absolutely certain that the people who hurt you understand exactly what they did and exactly what it cost them. I'm 44 years old, single by choice. Wealthy by my own hand, living in a home I own outright, driving a car I paid cash for, wearing clothes I bought because I liked them, not because they met someone else's standards. I have friendships based on mutual respect, professional relationships built on competence, and a life that's entirely, completely, beautifully mine. Some nights I stand at my penthouse windows and look out over the city and think about all the versions of myself I've been. The woman who married Marcus believing in love and partnership. The woman who attended Sunday dinners and wrote checks while being treated like she was beneath notice. The woman who discovered the theft and started documenting. The woman who built a case while pretending everything was fine. The woman who stood in that courtroom and watched justice get served. And this woman, the one I am now, who learned that you can survive betrayal and come out stronger on the other side. If you're setting yourself on fire to keep someone else warm, I want you to know something. You don't have to. You can stop. You can document. You can build your case. You can hold them accountable. It won't be easy. It will probably hurt. But on the other side of that pain is a version of yourself who doesn't accept disrespect, who knows her worth, who builds a life on her own terms. You deserve that version of yourself. You deserve to live without being diminished. You deserve consequences for the people who treat you as less than human. Your evidence is waiting. Your case is there to be built. You just have to be brave enough and strategic enough to start gathering it. Hit that like button if this story resonated with you. Share it with someone who needs to hear that staying silent doesn't mean staying weak. And comment documented below if you're ready to start building your own case, whatever that looks like in your life. Your future self is waiting. Don't make her wait too long.